Well, thank you everyone for coming today and welcome to the first panel of the day. So if you have questions, please raise your hands. We can do a short Q&A at the end, but if you're really excited about anything we're talking about, we can do it earlier. So I have with me Anthony Baker, CEO and founder of SatVu, and Patrick McCall, my former boss in a different life, and venture partner at SeraPhim. So the panel is today about SpaceTech and its role in combating climate change. But before we start, maybe we'll have an introduction from you, Anthony.
Yes, so Anthony Baker, CEO, co-founder of SatVu. My background is 25 years in space. Have helped build up many scale-up companies, had a few exits. And yes, so I find myself a CEO of a climate tech company, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the technology in a second.
Hi, I'm Patrick. I've been at SeraPhim for about 18 months on a part-time basis. Prior to that, I was also 25 years at Virgin Group. Started off working with Will Whitehorn, buying some trains, actually in this office. We did it. I know this office very well. Brings back some horrible memories. And then went on to do all sorts of things with Will and with Richard, chairman of Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit, was on the board of our bank, was chairman of Virgin Trains, health club business, and most importantly, probably for this discussion, set up all the ESG workings across Virgin Group about 15 years ago, which as we'll talk about, probably a little bit too early for its time, but very current now.
Thank you both. Back to you, Anthony. Tell us a little bit about SatVu. What exactly are you doing and how is that relevant for combating climate change?
Yes, so we have launched on SpaceX in June a unique satellite with a thermal infrared camera on board. So we can measure the heat emissions from any structure on the world at building level resolution. So in essence, we can work out where in the world we're wasting energy, and we can direct people to do something about that. Obviously, it works at night as well. So you'll be looking at Google Maps and you see everything in the daytime. We can now show you all that in nighttime as well. And with this thermal imagery, so there's sort of three main climate aspects. One is from the mitigation, the help climate mitigation. So where are we wasting energy? We can look at the thermal efficiency of processes. We can look at industrial sites where they might be throwing out energy into cooling lakes or rivers. And why isn't that being recycled? So making the world slightly more efficient. Second is the resilience part. The world is getting hotter, and we can see in the summertime in big cities that there's an urban heat island effect. So the cities are hotter than the rural areas. And you can see that currently with the scientific satellites, which are operating at sort of 100, 200 meters per pixel, but we are 3.5 meters per pixel. So we can tell which building is causing that heat island, which car parks, which roofs are generating that heat. And why is that important? Because heat stress kills people, and thousands a year. And there's now actually chief heat officers in certain cities, in Athens, Melbourne, Phoenix, which are in charge of reducing the heat on certain cities. And this is going to proliferate as the world gets hotter. What can they do? We can tell them where they should plant trees to keep the car parks cooler, because covering the car parks actually reduces the city heat. Or you can paint the roofs white and do something about that. The final aspect of our data is keeping people honest on their ESG ratings, especially the E part. People find it very hard to validate their supply chain credentials. So you might have a factory in China, they say they're very green. We can go and have a look and double check that they are green. So we're keeping people honest. Right now, there's regulations about reporting on ESG, but no one's measuring. Now we have a technology that can measure the whole world with a uniform data set, deliver it in a transparent way. We can check apples with apples and really check people's performances on their ESG credentials.
Thank you, Anthony. I can hear some passion here. So going back to when you started SatVu, what role did combating climate change play in that decision?
Well, we started looking initially at plastics in oceans. I wanted to so I really looked at a market focus. Why are people not buying more Earth observation data? Why is it not packaged in a way that it is with weather data or GPS? Why are people not using it? And there just wasn't the applications. But we thought we found something in plastic in the ocean. We could detect it. We could help people do some mitigation. Great solution. No one wanted to buy that data. So then we had this thermal infrared technology. It's a brand new category. It wasn't entirely clear what all the uses were going to be. But 40% of energy is used in buildings, either in the construction or the operation. And so we focused on that. It saves people money if we can fix that problem, and it reduces their carbon footprint. So that really was the founding first message.
Thank you. Back to you, Patrick. So you have spent, I believe, 25 years at Virgin Group, sitting on the boards of a lot of private and public companies. And so how has the discussion at board level evolved if you think back at Virgin Trains in 1997 to 2022? How's it driven?
It's changed a lot. Actually, I was pretty proud that when we bought the new trains for West Coast Main Line, which is now pretty old trains, we put regenerative braking onto them, which everybody now gets very excited about. Will loves this. So when we brake, we generate electricity, which was sort of groundbreaking. Then it's actually bizarrely still seen as relatively groundbreaking today. So we did some really interesting stuff early on. There wouldn't have been this many people sitting in a room wanting to talk about it. It's changed massively. There's all sorts of stories that we did at Virgin over time. I think we were far too early in terms of our journey on it. I mean, we did this thing called if this product could talk. We did this about 15, 20 years ago. If this microphone could tell you, has it got child labour? What are the minerals in it? Where do they come from? How's it transported? How do you recycle it? How's it packaged? I thought this was going to be amazing. Nobody had any interest in it whatsoever. But roll forward to 2023, I think that's the kind of thing particularly young people and consumers today want to hear about. So I think it's changed massively. It needs to change really, really quickly still because the world's still in a mess. But people are at last beginning to talk about it in some pretty exciting ways.
And so who drives or has driven the discussion? Is it the external directors? Does it come from the company, from the shareholders?
Well, I was called Swampy at Virgin, so when I first started. It's driven by people at the end of the day. I mean, we did a thing years and years ago with Virgin Trains. Some of our trains were diesel because there was no electricity on the lines we ran them on. We did a big event with Gordon Brown and Richard, shows you how long ago it was. I was really excited. We're going to have biodiesel for these new trains. And we announced it, huge PR, very exciting. And about 3 months later, we realized the whole thing was a total disaster. You know, the supply chain behind it, people didn't think about those kinds of things in those days. We realized it was actually carbon negative rather than carbon positive. So we learned a lot from that. And I think on the journey that you go on this, you're just going to make loads of mistakes. And unless you make mistakes, you don't learn. And here we are today. I think Virgin Atlantic this year or next year is going to have its first flight 100% fueled by sustainable fuels, not made from carbon products. So we've come a long way. It's taken a long time, but without making those mistakes, you don't get there.
Thank you. Then one last, maybe slightly personal question. I think you've become vegetarian recently. That was a long journey as well. So how has that influenced your thinking at a professional level?
I'm not sure everybody wants to know about my diet, Andre, but it's very simple. The story, I met the guys who made a film called Seaspiracy, quite relevant to what you've just heard about illegal fishing. Spoke to the guys who made it, watched the film, got beaten up by my kids, woke up the next morning and said, I've got to go vegetarian. We've got to do something about this. And it's really simple, not using the sea analogy, but basically there are very few fish left in the sea right now, but they do come back really, really quickly. I mean, one of my favorite facts on that is the best thing that's ever happened to fish in the Atlantic is World War II, because no one fished. These fish come back really, really quickly if you give them a chance. So the satellite technology you just heard about, if we can use that, the fish come back so quickly. but the reason I gave up eating meat and fish was, if you look at a field, we can eat it, what comes out of the field, or you can give it to an animal, and 80% of the calories disappear. It's the most inefficient way we can feed the world. And unless we change, you don't even have to do what I've done, but we've got to change how we eat. And it's not just a carbon issue, it's biodiversity. The biggest cause of it is a lot of focus on sewage in this country. It's what we do, but more importantly, it's what agriculture does to the ocean. So there's all sorts of things that have to change in a hurry, but that's probably enough preaching for now.
Thank you very much. Anthony, back to you. I think you've talked us through 3 products that you have in the market around energy efficiency, ESG ratings, and climate resilience. Where's your company today in terms of customers? What type of customers do you have? What traction do you have with them?
So it's we launched in June on SpaceX. We tested the hell out of the satellite over the summer. We only got the keys to the satellite. It was handed over to us last week. We showed the first imagery to the press and the world, and it's working better than we anticipated. So that's great news. We will start commercial service on the 1st of November. And we set ourselves a target of bookings of $5 million by Q1 next year. So before then, we decided, let's test the market. So we put our camera on a plane and we flew it up and down for the 3 years that we were building the satellites and developing the technology. And we put that data on our platform so everyone could look at it. And we made people sign up to commitments to indicate the prices they would be willing to pay, the sort of volume. And so we got over 80 customers from all different walks of industry, and commitments around 150 million pounds from them. So now we're converting those into capacity contracts. We've signed the first couple already, but even before we started commercial service, we're collecting test imagery today. The customers gave us 250 sites. Go and collect those, and I'll sign the contract. So guess what? This week we're collecting those 250 images, and next week we'll be pushing contracts in front of their face. So that's where we are right now.
Thank you. We had John Serafini talk about, I guess, global security earlier, and that's really a second megatrend that SatVu is exposed to as well, alongside climate. So how do you think about those two trends coexisting and you being one supplier to these two different worlds?
So we embrace this really early on. We see defense intelligence as supporting the business from the very beginning. They have their own satellites, which are infrared, but the data is super secret. And you heard about ITAR restrictions. This is highly classified data. They can't even share it with certain allies. Now there's a commercial version of the data which they can task us to provide an insight, and they can share that amongst allies. So we've got a community who has known buying powers, budgets already approved, and they understand that raw data, so we can just send them the imagery. And so they're just ready to buy now. And we're already fairly well ahead with Japan. We already have a contract signed with US process, and other governments are just waiting for these first images. So that's really underwrites the whole business. From there, we're building the platforms going to be paid for. Different techniques to get more and more insight out of each pixel will be developed, paid for by these government dollars. And all those techniques give us a competitive moat and enable the climate solutions. So it's a great synergy. And our investors are from the two halves as well. So they're deep tech space. Serafin was the lead in a couple of rounds. And there's investors who are from the climate side, and we got Lockheed Martin from the defense side and a number of others. And they all get the synergy, and they really support each other.
Well, thank you.
John, perhaps you could start by introducing yourself and ALL.SPACE.
Yeah, John Finney, I'm the CEO and founder of ALL.SPACE. We're a deep tech pre-revenue startup just about to launch our product. Beta launch is coming in few weeks from now. We're going GA in January, and that's the culmination of a 10-year deep tech journey. What we have in our hands today is the only technology in the world that's ever created simultaneous full performance connections to multiple orbits at the same time from a ground antenna system, and that is our our core USP. Why is that so important? It's important because space is clearly opening up, wave after next generation constellation, and the priority for the company, having at this point, in terms of sources and uses, accessed 116 million of capital, and we're at the point now where we're just closing our C round, so be substantially more than that. That takes us through our growth phase and continuing innovation, and that's brought us to a point where the first calling is really in defence, and that's brought about by a radically changing landscape which is coming as a threat from near-peer rivals, China and Russia, with capabilities to do all sorts of interesting things in space, dismantle satellites, jam them with lasers, so on and so forth. And ultimately what that means is that military satellites no longer sit on the invulnerable high ground that they once were. In fact, they're very vulnerable. And the way to mitigate that in the case of NATO and allies is to create a meshed environment. So that means using allied networks, such as OneWeb or Starlink, and mesh that together with their existing military systems. That then gives, along with our technology as the enabler on the ground, it gives resilient paths. So if ever there's a disruption to a satellite in space, the critical traffic will get through no matter what with our system. And then from there, we'll move on to aero, where we'll be much more focused on improving the passenger experience. The best of live TV and high-speed data typically requires multiple orbits, and from there we'll go on to mass market applications for enterprise, things like land transport, coaches, buses, etc., that are crying out for a contiguous bandwidth experience. And it's our technology that's basically enabling the fusion of satellites at multiple orbits combined with cellular to give the most convergent communications platform that exists on Earth today. That's what we do.
Thanks, John. Steve, perhaps you could introduce Iceye, but also it'd be great if you could explain the concept of dual-use technologies.
Sure, Rob, thanks very much. Well, hello, everyone. My name's Steve Young. I head up the satellite missions part of Iceye. Iceye is an organisation that was established around sort of 2016 or thereabouts with the intent of being able to globally map changes on the planet. If we want to see and measure what is going on with climate change and other things, we have to have a baseline measurement, and then we have to be able to see those changes on a regular and repeatable basis. The only real way of doing that on a global scale is with satellites. Now, prior to Iceye, most of that activity was done with optical systems, and there are many optical systems around. The problem with optical is they can't see at night and they can't see through clouds. So the only real way to get regular and repeatable, reliable data about what's happening on the Earth's surface is to use a radar satellite. And when Iceye was founded, most radar satellites were the preserve of nation states. They were very big and they were very expensive. And some organisations such as Surrey Satellite Technology in the UK, very well established and well respected organisation, I was the sales director at the time, we tried to produce a high performance, low cost radar satellite. Wasn't really very high performance and it wasn't really very low cost. So Iceye became the first organisation in the world to truly produce a genuinely high performance, low cost radar satellite. The first prototype was launched in January 2018. Against all of the experts saying it would never work, it worked brilliantly. And then funding came in to produce the first commercial grade satellite, which was launched in December 2018. And the intent of that was to start the commercial service. So I joined the company shortly afterwards to set up that commercial service. And here we are today with 24 satellites in, another 15 going up next year, another 21 going up the year after that. Alongside that, selling the data. We turn that into what we would call solutions. What do you do with the data? And insurance was mentioned earlier. One of our biggest emerging markets is the insurance industry for flooding, for wildfires, which Anthony was talking about earlier. There's huge potential in that market. And the third element for Icye's revenue stream is the actual satellites themselves. And this comes into the dual use point you were talking about. It's not difficult to understand where governments want to see and how they want to look at things. So there is a very, very strong market around the world for this type of technology, and has been mentioned several times here already today. The governmental market is existing. They've got requirements, they've got budgets, it's sticky, it's long-term, it's recurring, but that gives you essentially a very strong foundation on which to start developing some of the other applications, like in Icye's particular case, flood monitoring and wildfire monitoring for the insurance industry. So there's a number of areas in the space industry where it is just inherently dual use. And yes, government markets are there, they do have the money, and particularly now with what's going on around the world, it's very obvious to see why that is particularly strong at the moment.
Great, thanks, Steve. John, perhaps you could bring to life, both of you as companies have raised considerable sums of money to date from global investors. What is it that makes your companies really attractive in terms of those end market applications which are venture scale?
Yeah, sure. So specifically in our case, from the moment that I founded the company, the gap that I could see then is there wasn't a specific antenna technology that had the modularity and capability to go across every single data vertical. So that means from land, sea, and air within defense, but also high-end enterprises, and then down into connected car and IoT as hyperscale applications. And that really came down to the architecture of the pre-existing systems. So one of the aspects of that vision is talking to global investors. We're talking about revenue diversity in a moment where none of us have forgotten the impact of COVID. You wouldn't want to be, for example, an antenna company that's totally focused on aero. That's what COVID teaches us, right? And so revenue diversity across the whole piece and the ability to scale up and down into those verticals has really given us a leading argument and has been able to attract investors of strength and specialism such as Seraphim.
Thanks, John. And Steve, you touched on the stickiness of that dual-use customer base. Perhaps you could also talk about some of the challenges for selling into that sector as well.
Yeah, it's as was mentioned earlier, I think it was John from Hawkeye, that it is challenging selling to governments. They have often got very, very mature and embedded procurement processes, often embedded in law. There are often very stringent requirements you have to meet. Often they will compete very strongly, and you have to go through often a very long and drawn out process in order to get those contracts. But ultimately it is worth it because of the sticky nature of it and the recurring nature of it. And it is also gives you a lot of credibility and credentials if that government of a particular country, let's say it's the UK or the US or whoever it might be, has essentially given you a stamp of approval. What that then does is builds on a foundation that you can then start developing some of the other applications, like the civil things we've been talking about.
And when do you see the tipping point from a market perspective as we move towards those civil applications?
Yeah, there's both dual use in government and also government isn't exclusively defence. That's a very strong defence and security. Obviously, it's a very strong requirement. It's there. It's now. It's real. Government also has need for national resilience, flood monitoring, detection, all those sorts of things in times of particularly in natural disasters. So they're also interested in those things. But the strongest growth and potential we see by a factor of 10, if not more, is in the civil domain. The use of Earth observation data, whether that's optical or radar or infrared, such as Anthony was talking about, or RF, as John was talking about, that is the potential for growth there is absolutely huge. It has been essentially untapped, probably for a decade or two, and lots of debate about why. And where Iceye is now starting to see success, and that success accelerating, is because we are producing a consumable product out of our satellite data, rather than just analytics or a solution. It's an actual product that looks and feels and sounds like, in our case, a product an insurance person would understand. There's no point a satellite guy turning up to an insurance guy and say, hey, I've got great satellites and a great satellite image. Their eyes glaze over. You need to go and talk about insurance and what's the benefit to them and how it's going to benefit their lives and make their business better. As soon as we turned into that, that's when we started to see the benefits come.
We've heard several of the other portfolio companies talk about the importance of the insurance industry. What are the other kind of areas you're looking at the moment?
There are quite a lot of... Interesting journey for Iceye. There are so many applications that Earth observation data, in whatever its flavour, is applicable to. At one point, we had a list of 300. And this is covering everything from deforestation to illegal fishing to counting sheep on hillsides. You name it. You can pretty much come up with anything you wish. Crop health, all sorts of things. We found we had to focus. And for our specific case, the focus was into flooding, largely because the realities are systems, radar systems, are particularly good at looking at water. If there's flooding, it's clouds, so opticals don't work, so on. So it was an obvious choice for Iceye, but there are so many different opportunities out there. The challenge from our perspective is, how do you focus on the one that you're going to move forwards with, and how do you turn that into a product which is actually consumable and people will actually pay you money for? And that's the hard part.
John, you're an enabler to much of the exciting things we've heard today from the sort of LEOSat industry. What are the key opportunities you're looking at as the business evolves?
Yeah, so we're going to lead the conversation about what edge communication devices look like and what they should really be able to offer. And our conversation is led by thinking about our technology as a platform. So it seems a common theme here, just in relation to the 300 number, we had a huge amount of potential applications. Now we've narrowed down, and if I take defense as an example, the moment that you can create instantly software-defined links, you now think of them differently. So not necessarily as a communication path, but as a sensor. And now we can read the sky, and we can pick up on all of the RF that's around us. We can seek out intentional interference. We can lock onto it rather than try and avoid it. We can track it. We can do sophisticated things that have a very high monetary value, delivered as software, creating a high recurring EBITDA for the company over the life cycle of the deployment of our hardware, therefore creating stickier products. And so the value, it turns out, isn't just our ability to communicate to multiple orbits. We're now tapping into the value of being able to sense our complete environment and provide actionable data that might be processed at the back end of a network. So think of a Palantir meta-constellation type approach, or is actually enforced in terms of policies on our terminal, which includes things like AI and edge compute fully integrated to offer that level of sophistication.
Thank you, John. And Steve, back to you as we're coming towards the end of the session now. Both of you are defining the categories that you're in. What are the big milestones for your companies over the next 12 months?
Yeah, good question. Iceye is very much focused on delivering the foundation of both the satellite data, the satellites themselves, and then using the revenue that delivers to develop the what we would call solutions, essentially these civil applications. We've started with flooding and wildfire. We're going to expand into other areas. At the same time, we're drawing in other technologies, other requirements for the satellites themselves, which continue to be developed on a very, very regular basis. So the speed with which some of these capabilities are developing is one of the things which I think Iceye has really managed to capture. And I think we'll start to see into satellite links. We'll see much faster processing. We've talked about edge stuff on orbit being processed. And it's really moving now from satellites as what used to be termed as more of a strategic asset to satellites that can now be used as a tactical asset, because we can deliver data now measured in minutes, where it used to be measured in hours and days. So it's completely changed the game.
Thanks, Steve. John?
Yeah, for us, well, first and foremost, it's delighting Seraphim and keeping Mark and James particularly happy. But the way that we'll do that is, firstly, operationalize the company. In our case, where we are right now, the demand far eclipses where I assumed we would be at this point. We have, in fact, pre-sold our technology across 3 continents. We are involved in strategic major programs, one of which is at a significant scale with, in total, 3 armed services within NATO. We have in the order of about 30 million of take or pay contractual revenue for next year, and we're confident we'll meet or exceed our approximate 100 million target for next year. The pipeline is particularly robust. It's running in the order of 700 million of qualified opportunities, and we are leading with defence. The customer values is not trying to monetize lives. It puts a value on being able to operate in a contested environment, and that's what we're bringing. And now we're continuing to innovate in parallel with that. We're really thinking about those commercial markets and aviation and large enterprises. So it's innovate, it's operationalize, and it's deliver the pipeline, which right now is looking fantastically healthy.